Should you stop eating bread? Going gluten-free is one of the biggest health fads around right now, and it just so happens to go hand in hand with the paleo goal of avoiding wheat and grains. But is it necessary? A lot of people believe that bread can have a negative impact on digestion. Celiacs and gluten-intolerant individuals are people who have an allergy to wheat and who really should avoid gluten. Thus, gluten-free foods appeared on our shelves and companies started promoting them. Now everyone is acting as though they need to avoid gluten. In reality, only 1% of the population suffers from celiac disease. In these individuals, gluten can cause the villi to atrophy. Villi are tiny fingers that live inside the intestines and which grab onto food as it goes past to absorb nutrients. Those with celiac disease can't eat gluten as it causes the villi to shrink away and stop working, which in turn prevents them from properly digesting and absorbing their foods. The result is that they can't benefit from the nutrition in their foods and they become malnourished. Symptoms include headaches, cramps, diarrhea, tiredness, and more. Gluten sensitivity, meanwhile, causes similar symptoms but to a lesser degree. And what's more, it's believed that gluten sensitivity isn't actually caused by gluten, but rather by something else entirely called FODMAPs. The problem is that celiac disease and gluten sensitivity often go undiagnosed for a long time. Because the main symptoms are depression, tiredness, headaches, etc., it's often mistaken for chronic fatigue syndrome, stress, or even irritable bowel. Eventually, doctors suggest that patients try avoiding bread and they start to feel the best they've ever felt. Now, lots of us find that we feel tired, groggy, and stressed a lot of the time. This leads to a kind of hope that we might in fact have a gluten sensitivity. If that's the case, then we should be able to avoid bread and feel better than ever. Then we avoid bread and we convince ourselves that that's the case. But you don't have a gluten sensitivity in all likelihood, and there's no evidence that bread can negatively impact on the average individual. Another concern is something called wheat belly. This is a concept that was popularized by a writer called William Davis with his book, also called Wheat Belly. In that book, he claimed that genetically modified proteins in bread, called gliadin, could act as an appetite stimulant through opioid channels. Davis claimed that gliadin was responsible for us eating up to 440 additional calories a day, suspiciously precise. He also said that starch's unique structure gave it an incredibly high GI, glycemic index. This would cause bread to release its calories into the body much more quickly, resulting in a sugar high and subsequent lipogenesis, the creation of fat cells, and lethargy. In other words, he describes bread as being the simplest of simple carbs and reacting in the body a little bit like pure sugar. But here's the good news. All of this is wrong. The starch in bread is exactly the same as in anything else. Starch only comes in two forms from plant tissues, amylose and amylopectin. And bread actually has a lower GI than potatoes or rice. The stuff about gliadin is also nonsense. Gliadin only acts like an opiate in extremely high doses, higher than any human would ever eat. And research suggests that the human intestine may not absorb gliadorphin anyway. And importantly, bread is very convenient for making sandwiches and very nutritious. This is an excellent source of fiber that can improve your blood pressure and circulation, and it also contains a lot of minerals thanks to the added seeds. Eat whole grain bread, not the same thing as whole wheat, and you'll get the germ, the endosperm, and bran from the bread. And this is very healthy. Sure, bread is still a relatively high GI carb, and if you eat too much of it, then you can gain weight quite easily. But there's no need to completely cut sandwiches out of your diet. It's far too complicated and far too hard to stick to, and there are no benefits. This is the perfect example of the flaw in a lot of paleo thinking. Just because bread wasn't around for cavemen doesn't mean that we can't eat it. It's healthy, it's convenient, and it's tasty.